Chapter 20. Mile of Light. The moon was silent, but not still. For the first time in its history, a single line of light now threaded across the lunar horizon, unbroken, unwavering. From the eastern edge of the Syndicate's circular dominion to its western rim, the underground train line had been completed. Beneath layers of dust and time, it hummed. Atop the surface, thousands had gathered at designated points villages, domes, fields, and tunnels to witness a moment that had only been spoken of in prophecy like tones. Ezra stood near the terminal junction, his boots planted at the edge of the final rail segment. The chamber around him, arched with polished lunar stone and reinforced alloy, was filled with quiet tension, as if all of history had leaned forward to hold its breath. The Covenant spike was suspended between two apprentices. Forged from the first lunar mineral ever mined by the Syndicate, it shimmered faintly, even in the sterile light. Etched along its four faces were the names of the 12 founding families, a verse from Isaiah, and the words, "One way, one people, one light." A silence fell as the gathered elders approached, robes clean, eyes full. The old tools were brought out, not ceremonial replicas, but the actual tools used by each district to build their stretch of track. Notched, worn, and revered. One by one these were placed into a circle, as if laying their burdens before the Lord. Ezra took the hammer from Shay, who winked and whispered, "Give it heaven, brother." With a firm grip, Ezra raised the tool high. Around him, speakers opened across the sublunar cities and domes, projecting a live relay to millions. Behind him stood Eve and Micah, ahead the unfinished spike. Somewhere above, orbiting ships paused their routines to look down on the bright line snaking across the gray. Ezra spoke the words not from paper, but from memory and conviction. As our fathers laid paths in the wilderness, so we have laid track through the dust. As Israel carried the ark, so we carry the covenant. Let this spike bind our tribes. Let this rail be our ribbon of peace. And with a single thunderous strike, the spike of light was driven. From one end of the moon to the other, 12 towers ignited, one by one, their glow flowing like a ribbon of fire across the land. The dome above shimmered like a second Earth, banners drifting on the artificial breeze, glass refracting light across hundreds of upturned faces. The celebration had been months in the making. A new rail line now stitched together the Syndicate, a full lev rail infrastructure, complete with cargo pods, solar stops, and passenger routes. The world called it a miracle. The Syndicate called it surface. Families gathered. Children held bundles of wheat and pouches of imported soil from all over the Terra, from Korea, Texas, England, anywhere hometown may have been to present during the ceremony. Music floated from raised platforms, a choir of 3 villages joining voices in seamless harmony. Smells of honeyed bread, roasted yams, and recycled eucalyptus filled the dome. And yet, Major Jackson stood at the edge of it all. She wore her full Space Force dress uniform, ribbons polished, boots silent on the floor. An American diplomat beside her made small talk with the mayor of a Syndicate farming district. Jackson barely registered the conversation. Her eyes scanned the crowd, not in awe, but in assessment. There were exits, columns, glass load-bearing structures. She clocked them all. A lifetime of discipline wouldn't let her rest. Someone passed her a plate, sweetbread and preserved lemon slices. She nodded her thanks, but didn't eat. Ezra spotted her across the dome and made his way over, weaving through performers and trade officials. His robe was simple, navy linen with a silver sash. His arc was tucked away, deliberately absent from view. "I hope we're not boring you to death, Major," he said with a smile. She returned it, tired but warm. Hardly. You throw a fine celebration. Efficient, joyful, good command presence on the choir. We take our logistics seriously. There was a pause. She was staring past him now, at a boy lifting his sister up so she could see the rail replica on the stage. Ezra followed her gaze. You look like someone who wants to belong but doesn't quite know how. That caught her off guard. She glanced at him, then away, again. Her voice lowered. You ever feel like you don't belong anywhere? That's not a complaint. It's just geography. Her arc vibrated gently at her wrist. She checked it without hesitation. An encoded military ping. Source, unlisted. Signal strength, strong. A message she wasn't supposed to receive in this hemisphere, let alone on the moon. She dismissed it instantly, but her gaze changed. Ezra noticed. He didn't press. Mateo waved them over from the stage. 5 minutes. Jackson gave him a salute. Mateo grinned, exaggerated it, and turned back toward the delegation he was guiding. He's a good man, she said, watching him go. Better than he knows, Ezra replied. She hesitated, then spoke with a strange gentleness. That kind the kingdom recognizes, whether or not the church does. Ezra blinked. And you? Jackson turned fully toward him now, posture rigid but expression tired. I'm still under review, I think. Behind them the choir shifted into a new key. This land we've built, the voices sang, isn't ours to claim. But if the Lord has given it, we will bless his name. And in that moment, brief and sharp, Ezra thought of a Roman centurion, not the kind who mocked the cross, but the one who stood beside it, the one who looked up and whispered, surely this was the Son of God. He looked at Jackson again. She was watching the children. She didn't sing. The corridor was too quiet for this sector. Major Jackson moved like smoke through the service tunnel, each step silent on the grated floor. The lights overhead flickered once, like a pulse in a dying body, then steadied. Her arc buzzed softly, signaling she was on track. Coordinates led her beneath the southern rim of the dome, where forgotten cargo shafts and old construction warrens twisted like roots. No guards, no cameras, no eyes. She passed a drone, deactivated, slumped against a wall with its lenses shattered. Odd. A metal door opened without her touching it. Inside, darkness. Then a low hum. A pale halo of light formed over a table. A figure stood at the edge of the circle, face obscured by shadows and a long carbon weave hood. They didn't speak at first, only motioned to the chair. Jackson didn't sit. You know who I am, she said. The voice that answered wasn't familiar. It had a synthetic layer, but behind it was something calm, measured. We know who you are. The question is who you're becoming. A pause, a subtle shift in the figure's weight. You've seen what's coming. You've felt the ache of doing nothing. We offer a third way. A small metallic device slid across the table. A data node. No symbols, no markings. What is it? Something that only works when it's needed. Considered a lifeline or a test. Jackson didn't reach for it. Not yet. Walk both roads, Major. You're one of the few who still can. The light dimmed. The figure was gone before her eyes adjusted. Jackson stood alone, the chip still gleaming like a quiet dare. The choir had just begun the third verse when the floor shuddered. Not a tremor, not a pressure shift. A deep, visceral thump that rolled through the dome like the belly of a leviathan turning in its sleep. For a split second, everything held still, like even gravity was holding its breath. Then the blast hit. A roar of fire and glass tore through the western edge of the convention hall, where support personnel had gathered near the docking corridor. A concussive force folded the stage canopy inward. Banners burst into flame midair. Shards of the east viewport rained down like meteors. Ezra was thrown backward. His ears rang. He couldn't tell if he was screaming. He blinked once, twice, then, Mateo! The name wasn't his voice. It was Naomi's. Smoke curled up from the platform. Mateo had been at the side ramp, helping a crew unload musical gear. Now his body was curled protectively over a teenage boy, blood smearing the polished white tiles beneath him. "He saved him," someone whispered. "He pulled him down just in time." But the wound across Mateo's back was deep, blackened at the edges. The kind of wound that came not from debris, but from the epicenter. Naomi collapsed beside him, trying to hold pressure on something too far gone. Across the room, Jackson was already moving. Orders burst from her lips like rapid-fire rifle. "Secure the blast zone. Pressure seal those hatches. Get the wounded away from the windows." Her voice carried even through the ringing. She shoved aside wreckage, grabbed an unconscious girl by the collar, pulled her free from a fallen beam. Her uniform was scorched, her arc cracked, but she didn't stop. Not when the sirens kicked in, not when the secondary alarms warned of radiation detection from the blast site. Not even when she saw Mateo. She paused only for half a second, eyes locking on Naomi's, before lifting him gently to ease pressure off the boy beneath him. But it was too late. He was already whispering. "Still good," he murmured. "He's still good." And then Mateo was gone. A syndicate medic ran in seconds later. Naomi was sobbing, holding his hand. Jackson stood slowly, swaying for a moment, then adjusting her stance like a soldier resetting her flame. Ezra approached, dazed and bruised. "Was it sabotage?" She didn't answer. Not yet. She was looking at the smoke where the bomb had gone off. Her eyes weren't afraid. They were resigned. A low buzz came from her arc, encrypted, unlabeled. She glanced down, just a line of text. "Not our doing, but it begins." She erased it with a flick. The music had stopped. The celebration banners fluttered half-burned. In the smoky dome of what had once been peace, Jackson whispered only to herself. They hit a sanctuary, not a station, not a ship, a place of worship. Her hands flexed once at her sides, then stilled. The triage center had been a maintenance bay 6 hours earlier. Now it was filled with the scent of blood, disinfectant, and ozone. Rows of cots lined the walls. Makeshift dividers hung from hooks and wires, casting long shadows on the floor. Technicians from both Syndicate and U.S. response teams moved in rhythm, stitching wounds, assessing trauma, logging the missing. The ambassadors of light were scattered in the corners of the room, each carrying something invisible. Eve wrapped Naomi's arm with sterile cloth, whispering quietly as Naomi stared at nothing. Micah sat beside a boy missing half his left foot, distracting him with stories from his childhood farm goats. Jonah paced in slow, measured loops by the entrance, glancing every few minutes toward Ezra. Ezra stood with his hand resting on a cot frame. Mateo's cot, empty now, a white sheet folded at his foot. His arc displayed the initial coroner's code. Fatal blast trauma, protective shield, secondary impact. A hero's death, but no less tragic. Jackson hadn't spoken since they arrived. She changed out of her burned uniform. Now she wore civilian blacks, borrowed from one of the American staffers. Her hair was still wet from the sanitation scrub. She sat alone at a small table near the emergency station. A bowl of broth had gone cold in front of her. She stirred it, tapped the spoon against the rim, stirred it again. Her eyes never left the wall. Ezra approached and sat across from her without speaking. Silence held. Then he said softly, "You saved 6 people today." She blinked. Not at him, just once. "Didn't save Mateo." He nodded slowly. "No, you didn't. But you saved 12 families from mourning too." Her lips pressed together. A long breath slipped through her nose. "He didn't hesitate," she said. "He saw the boy, covered him without thinking. Like a shield. Like a disciple." Micah walked past with a data pad and caught the tail end of the conversation. He paused beside them. "Initial reports say the blast came from a cargo crate. Planted. No Syndicate manifest. No American scan flagged it. That's not amateur work." Ezra glanced up. "Red Pact?" Micah shrugged. "Maybe. But no one's claimed responsibility, which is worse." "Why worse?" Jackson asked, her voice flat. "Because it means they're not done yet." Across the room, a Syndicate liaison finished giving blood. She stood and wobbled slightly. Jackson rose instantly, steadied her, then sat back down. No fanfare, no words. Micah watched her for a second longer. "You all right, Major?" "Fine." "You don't look fine." Jackson finally met his eyes. "Then don't look." He nodded, respectfully, and backed off. Ezra stayed. "You know what I see?" he said gently. "I see someone who's still standing." She looked away again, down at the cold bowl. "You see someone who can't cry in public." Ezra tilted his eye. "And what about in private?" "Doesn't help, just fogs up your arc." Her arc paused gently. She checked it. Another message, encrypted. No sender listed, just a string of numbers and an outdated protocol tag from Earth's military channels. She deleted it. But Ezra noticed her flinch. "Still walking both roads?" She didn't reply. Across the room, Eve finished wrapping Naomi's shoulder. The two of them watched a nearby wall screen as a news broadcast replayed footage from the celebration. Fire, smoke, then silence. The headline read, "Terror strikes lunar celebration. Unknown assailants blamed." A subheadline behind it, "U.S. and Syndicate vow joint investigation." Ezra and Jackson both read it, then looked at each other. "You think this is the beginning of something bigger?" he asked. Jackson stirred her soup again. "I think it's the end of something we never really had." The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss. No alarms, no sirens, no voices, just silence. Jackson stood still for a moment inside her embassy quarters, her hands still on the panel, the lights adjusted automatically. Too warm. She dimmed them with a swipe, then locked the door with a command she didn't say out loud. She was still in her borrowed black clothing, dust from the triage center in the seams. She hadn't gone to the chapel. Couldn't. She unfastened her boots, kicked them off without looking. Her jacket hit the floor next. She moved to the mirror, stopped, turned it off. The room was Spartan. Bed, desk, a few medals she never requested to be mounted. One digital photo frame, a picture of her and 2 other officers from Earth. They were smiling. She wasn't. She sat on the edge of the bed, let her hands hang between her knees, then opened her arc. It booted silently, the interface still cracked from the blast. She bypassed the standard screen, traced a shape only she knew, and entered a hidden menu. A small icon pulsed like a breath. The chip file. Access key present, ready to open. She didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, she whispered aloud, "You can't walk both roads." Her voice caught. She swallowed it. "You can't serve two masters." The weight of that truth settled like a stone. She stared at the file, not blinking, but it already started down both. Her thumb hovered. She imagined opening it, reading what she already suspected. Who planted the bomb, who knew, who let it happen, information that would break the peace or her soul. She didn't open it. She didn't delete it. She set the ark aside. And she laid down on top of the bedspread, arms closed tightly over her chest like a soldier at rest or a body waiting to be buried. The ceiling above was smooth, composite alloy and thermal shielding, nothing divine about it. But she looked up anyway. "If you're still listening," she blinked hard, "tell me where I belong. Just once." Silence. She breathed in, let it out slow, and said the last thing she could offer. "Not my will, yours." Then she turned onto her side, reached for the ark, pulled it close like a child's blanket, and closed her eyes, shedding one tear after another.